Hello, welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theater podcast, and on this show, I talk to people who make theater, some of whom you've heard of, and others I think you really should learn about. On this show, I talk to people who make theater, whether they're directors, writers, actors, producers, whatever it is. As long as they're making theater, I'm talking to them. If you stay around to the end of the show, you'll get a little preview of who's on the show next week, as well as some other little tidbits of information. Today, I'm talking with Iain Moggach. Iain was the artistic director of Theatre by the Bay from 2018 to 2024. He is also a director, and he's directed many different productions, most recently Bluebirds at Theatre on the Ridge, which received tremendous acclaim from audiences and critics. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Here's my conversation with Iain Moggach. Iain Moggach, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you making some time for me. You have just closed Vern Thiessen's Bluebirds. Tell me about that show, and how did you come to be working on that?
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar, Bluebirds is a really gorgeous three-hander, 90-minute play by Vern Thiessen about three Canadian nurses in World War I. The Bluebirds referring to sort of their nickname that they were given because of their iconic blue uniforms. And I've been a huge fan of Vern Thiessen's work for a long, long time. I remember seeing Shakespeare's Will when I was 16 at the Stratford Festival and just thinking like, wow, this guy is amazing. And so his work has always been one that I've kept an eye on. Then in 2023, I got to direct and commission a world premiere of Iceman by him, which was really cool. So as I was sort of thinking about what shows I wanted to do for this really wonderful company called Theatre on the Ridge in Port Perry, Bluebirds came to mind just because it's so concise. It's a great story as well. It's a great opportunity for three female youngish performers, which I know that they typically love to hire there. So it was just this perfect confluence of all these different factors coming together and just ended up being a really amazing experience.
I love learning about new theater companies that I haven't heard of. And, there are all kinds of great small companies in small towns or mid-sized towns all over Canada. And I'm not familiar with Theatre on the Ridge in Port Perry. And so I'll ask almost an ignorant question. Is that a new company or how did you come to work with them?
It's a great question, actually. So yeah, they've been around for over a decade now, actually. And interestingly, their first production was Vimy by Vern Thiessen, which is sort of the sister play to Bluebirds back, I think, in 2013-ish, 2014. And I've actually been aware of them for a little while. The first thing that I did when I was out of theater school at George Brown was Landon Doak and I did a musical version of Romeo and Juliet in the Old Flame Brewery in the middle of Port Perry. And that's when Carrie, who's the artistic director there, became aware of me and aware of my work. We ended up doing this like week-long directing workshop in Stratford through Theatre Ontario together. And we just kind of kept in touch for many years. And then, yeah, when I left Theatre by the Bay, she was one of the first people to give me a call to say, hey, let's collaborate. Let's find a way to make this work. And I hadn't seen much of their work, but I knew, of course, of the great impact that it was having. I love Port Perry as a town. It's this like really cute town by the water, and they've just been doing great stuff. But they are really like a rural theater company. Like, the actors, when they're billeted, are often on these farms in the middle of nowhere. So it's a really unique place to work. And over the last few years, they've been working under this gorgeous tent that they got as sort of like a pandemic. We're going to do outdoor theater, but, let's protect people from the rain investment. And it's actually a fantastic place to work. It worked really well for the show. And yeah, they've fostered great audiences there. And artists work with them year after year after year, which I think really speaks to the community that Carrie's inspired and the quality of employment and work that they do there.
And great things happen under tents. The Stratford Festival got its start under tents, and I like the idea that some of the things that we started doing during the pandemic have sort of held over, and people have kind of got attached to them. The cafes on the streets, we're keeping those, and tents for theaters. I think that's amazing too.
Absolutely. I mean, there's something so unique and powerful and almost like primal about it, right? I mean, with Bluebirds, because of course the shows were in the evenings, the way that the sun would set would actually like impact the lighting on the show. And so there's these beautiful points later in the evening performances where these long shadows would be kind of cast, and like the actors would be naturally lit and stuff. And it just added this really powerful quality to it. And then once the show was done and you'd leave the tent, there you are looking out at this gorgeous field with these extraordinary sunsets. Like one of the actors ended up just taking photos of the sunsets every single night because it was just, they were breathtaking each time in different ways. Yeah, I really loved working there. I love working outdoors. I love working under tents. I agree, more tents.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you were artistic director at Theater by the Bay in Barrie from 2018 to 2024. That's a good stint as artistic director. And some people might not really be aware of the work that Theater by the Bay does. So give me a little bit about Theater by the Bay.
Sure. So Theater by the Bay was actually founded back in 2001 by Larissa Mayer, who people may know, great big casting director based in Toronto now. And the idea was Shakespeare under a tent by Barrie's waterfront. I know, it all comes back to tents. But, I think the reality of tent life caught up with them, and also the mandate ended up needing to change a bit. There was a stint into musicals, kid shows, things like that. And then when Alex Doe, who is the former artistic director, and myself got involved, we really started asking, like, what do Barrie audiences need, and what can we do that would be really different and significant, right? Because I mean, because of Barrie's really like odd location where it's close enough to Toronto for a lot of people, but it's also kind of an island in and of itself. It's, so like you could access some of the best Shakespeare, some of the best musicals just 2 hours-ish away if you got terrible traffic, right? And that's fine for some people. So what we ended up focusing in on was this idea of doing original work about the local area. And that was something that really took off in a huge way. People loved it. It was a really great way to sort of examine local history, but also sort of contemporary narratives and themes in a way that felt accessible and important. And I loved it. I mean, it was the reason I bought in so hard right away, and ended up attracting all these different interesting people. So when I became artistic director, I really doubled down on the idea of bringing playwrights, especially from the outside, to look at Barrie through sort of a magnifying glass and find what sort of sticks out to them. So that's how we ended up getting Vern Thiessen to write Iceman, which was about the ice harvesting industry. And he wrote this, like, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but it's like a three-hander thriller set in this like hut in Innisfil. And it's all about the ice industry, and it's fantastic. And then like we had Chloe Hung writing a play for us. We had Colleen Murphy writing a play for us. And also, of course, because of our local focus, we ended up fostering all these great playwrights. Like we had Zygmunt Mixamong write a play for us, Trudy Romanek. So the momentum was really carrying on, and that's what really powered it through for me to have been there from almost, fall of 2015 all the way until fall of 2024. Was just that I could see the momentum. I loved the work. I saw the impact, and it was just, it felt very special and important.
I think one of the things that I find interesting, or almost not interesting is not the right word, because I'm thinking about the fact that, as you said, Barrie is 2 hours away from Toronto, depending on traffic. And yet so few people from Toronto ever experience what is happening in the scene in Barrie. Just like, there's interesting things that happen in Hamilton. It's an hour away. but most
Mhm.
people in Toronto don't get to experience it. The transit time tends to keep people away. And I really think that in a way we're all missing out on these wonderful pieces of theater that are taking place not so far away, but because of travel, we're sort of denying ourselves that.
Oh, the number of times I have gone on, rants, especially once I've had a few drinks in me, about the transit situation to some of these places. Like, yeah, I mean the train. I mean, in an ideal world, there'd be a train every hour, especially in the summer, right? Like that just would make so much sense. But yeah, just the absolute lack of public transit infrastructure, it has an impact on everything. I mean, Barrie is like, especially in the summer, Barrie is a gorgeous place to go. There is amazing art that happens here. I mean, Theater by the Bay is just one of the companies. Like, there's also Talk is Free, which continues to sweep the Doras, right? Like, and has actually started to just bring its work into Toronto for people to see it, right? So it's incredibly frustrating. And I mean, as you sort of mentioned, like it speaks to a much larger issue, which is the lack of eyeballs and recognition of the work that happens outside of Toronto or any of those sort of major urban centers. Like, and in a country that's, I don't know how many kilometers long, thousands of kilometers long, for the fact that, like, unless you do work in what 5, 6 cities, it's just not really recognized in a meaningful way, boggles my mind and seems really antithetical to what we as a nation should be looking at in terms of national identity and these kinds of things.
I mean, listen, we could get into the whole idea of how we don't value art as part of the national identity. And when we're talking about nation building projects, we're talking about shipping and trade barriers and pipelines, and we're never talking about the arts, which is that's not how you build a nation. You build a nation through the arts, through storytelling. But one of the things that I agree with is like transit. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's still the case, but I know it used to be that Barrie had a train, but it went to Toronto in the morning and from Toronto in the evening. So if you were taking the go, that was it. If you wanted to get to Barrie in the morning, or you wanted to go back to Toronto from Barrie, it was go bus or that's it. Like it is the transit situation in Ontario is pretty bad.
It's so terrible. And that basically is the case now. Like, it's so horrific. I mean, I remember when I first moved to Barrie, didn't take me more than a few weeks to go, what do you mean there's no train? What do you mean the last train's at 7 o'clock in the morning? Like,
Right?
that's crazy. That's completely crazy. Yeah, it is. It's a massive, massive issue. And I mean, it's summertime now. There's a million cars that go on the 400 every summer, people driving to and from cottages, to and from work and stuff like that. You'd think that, like, investing in mass public transit to Barrie, which is really at the epicenter of so many different places that you can go, would be a much bigger priority than it is. And I tell politicians anytime I see them, especially at the provincial level, like anytime I see them, that they've got to really get into that. And they say, "Oh yeah, we've been working on it. This is a thing. Transit's very important to us." And it's like, where's the proof?
Listen, transit is not as important to them as they'll say that it is, but they just want to make more highways, right? Like,
Yes.
dig a tunnel to get more highway space. And it's just like, just give us buses, trains, give us ways to travel around this province. We don't even have Greyhound anymore, right? Like, you can't like just jump on a bus to go to these small towns anymore. They're underserved. Anyway. Wow, I didn't think that was
Anyone
going.
who
I didn't
knows
think transit was the thing that was going to get me going.
Well, anyone who knows me, who will listen to this interview, will not be surprised at all that I spent 5 minutes of my theater interview on a podcast talking about transit. But yeah,
The next we should talk about is Borough Theater. Tell me what is Borough Theater?
Sure. So Bird Theater it started as a little bit of like a passion project. So when I was the executive director of Theater by the Bay, I was desperate to be creative. I couldn't stand just writing grants and raising money. I needed to make art. I am an artist, gosh darn it. So my then girlfriend of the time, now wife, Marissa, and I decided, hey, like, because back in the very early days of my sort of producing life, I did shows in backyards in Toronto. I was part of that sort of 2015 wave of backyard shows. We have a great backyard here, and we have lots of talented friends that needed work. Because another little facet of Barrie and Simcoe County more generally is that there's no indie theater at all. There's like a couple professional companies, and there's community theater, and there's absolutely nothing in the middle. So we have all these really talented people that were doing stuff for free. Maybe they didn't go into theater professionally anymore or whatever, but like they're really talented. So anyways, so we went to Flying Monkeys Brewery in downtown Barrie and had a few drinks. And then we were like, let's just do a Midsummer Night's Dream in our backyard. We'll hire all our friends. We'll have a great time and just see what happens. And that show completely sold out, like multiple performances. There was so much goodwill. It ended up launching all these backyard and sort of unique space things across the county. And it just really took off. And then in the second year, we did Macbeth, and one of the audience members who attended Midsummer in the first year worked for this really fancy private resort called Friday Harbor. And she said, hey, can I buy your production of Macbeth to do at our fancy? We're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, so we ended up doing Macbeth, a few performances in our backyard, took it to this really fancy resort. And it was just like, I think this is a thing. Like, I'm also someone who's always tried to be extremely entrepreneurial. And so when I saw opportunity and knock-in, I answered. So yeah, so we did that. And then another audience member who attended both shows ended up being part of this organization called Camp Hill that works with adults with disabilities primarily. And she was like, we have this gorgeous hall out in Angus that is very underutilized. We'd love for you to start bringing your shows there as well. And so we had, of course, plans for 2020. We know how that all went. We were going to do Merry Wives of Windsor. And then, a few years later, I didn't need to do Burrowed stuff because I was the AG. I was doing all these projects I cared about. My wife ended up going more into like dance and stuff for a while. Anyway, and then as I was leaving Theater by the Bay, I was sort of thinking about like what are some things that I could kind of do around here that would help me keep busy in the area so I don't have to commute for everything I do, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I reached out to the Camp Hill people. We went for coffee. And then they were like, we're still really interested in you doing stuff there. So we ended up having this great chat. And then we sort of concluded that Burrowed would be the resident theater company of this hall in the woods that they'd give us for free as long as we promised to activate it and do workshops and stuff. So it was just this like perfect synergy of we need a space, they have a space. They need programming. We have programming. And now we're collaborating on grants. We're going to do a little pilot project in the fall of an adaptation of The Seagull that I've been working on and stuff. And it's just, it's a really exciting moment and an example of, even though I'm done with Theater by the Bay, I still have more to give to this area. And I'm really excited about what the future holds for it.
Well, you live there. You should want to give to that community, right?
You'd think, yeah. You'd think people would want to do that. But yes, I agree. But like I will just say this, my end at Theater by the Bay was messy. And part of that messiness was that I had felt very burnt out by just the years of work and all the slogging and everything. And so I wasn't sure if I had much juice left in me to give to this place that I'd given really a third of my life to, right? But this came about and it felt like I do. and I'm excited about it. And there's a lot of community that is still really excited about what I can do here. So yeah.
Nice, nice, yeah. And I'm sure. I mean, you mentioned this space in the woods. It must be gorgeous in the fall when the leaves start to turn. What a time to be doing
Oh
a
yeah.
seagull.
Absolutely. I know it's gonna, well, I mean, it's same with, it's kind of like under the tent, right? Like I'm a big believer that that atmosphere and location can and should really play a large part in the production itself if it can. There should be a dialogue there. And maybe that's tied back to my like backyard Shakespeare days in Toronto too, but location and story are so interwoven. And so yeah, like, I imagine people driving up to the hall, yeah, the leaves changing color, and as they go into this space that's like warm and inviting, and hearing this very minimalist but hopefully very moving story that not a lot of people in the area know before. Like we kind of take it for granted, but there's going to be a lot of people, I bet, that don't know the story, and that's a really wonderful opportunity and a big responsibility too.
The idea that we know the end of these classic stories, right? We know how they go. That is a inside theater kind of thing, right? I remember many years ago, I was talking, I don't know, I was on like Facebook or something, and I mentioned how Macbeth ends.
Mm.
And somebody was like, spoilers.
Oh.
And I was like, this play's 500 years old or more. Like, what do you mean spoilers? But we take it for granted that we know the end of the story. I've heard that at the end of Hadestown, many people don't know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, and so when the end of that happens, there are audible gasps in the audience. Like that, those are the audiences that like I really want to bring out to this kind of thing. Like if you don't know how this goes, boy, do we have something for you.
Absolutely. I mean, and hopefully even with those stories that are well known, you find a way to make it feel kind of new again. But you're right. I mean, honestly, that's part of the reason that I've done so much and love doing new work, right? Is that like they are not gonna know it from the beginning, even those that are extremely, familiar with theater and stuff. But yeah, and I think like that is another part of working in a regional community, right? Is yeah, the things we kind of take for granted are brand new. I mean, when we launched Burrowed, like the idea of Shakespeare in a backyard was like, what? Like theater doesn't have to be in a professional theater space. It's like, yeah, theater can happen anywhere, right? That's one of the great things about it. And yeah, and so, you just got to be the first to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's step back for a minute because I really want to hear from you about your theater origin story. How did you get into theater? How did you get into directing? What is your origin story?
Sure. So I was a theater kid from an extremely young age. I was the star of my kindergarten play, and that was sort of how that all began. I did lots of drama camps and stuff. I'm from Ottawa originally, so a lot of drama camps in Ottawa, and went to the arts high school in Ottawa, Canterbury as well. And it was something that I loved to do. I especially when I was younger, all my guy friends were really like sport people. Like there's so much soccer and stuff. And like I didn't mind it, but theater was sort of a space where I felt more myself. I met interesting people that like I wouldn't have met through my, grade 4 class at much more so it was just and I was very creative. um I didn't I liked school, but I wasn't necessarily like an A+ student all the time. But but theater was where I really shone, and my parents also worked that out pretty quickly. And so yeah, when I went to, and also I got like very competitive about it at a young age. Like I was reminiscing with a friend that I was at my parents' house, and I found this like old headshot of myself when I was 14. And I said to this friend of mine, and she was like, Yeah, I remember that guy. He told me once that when I first met him that he was going to destroy me in Shakespeare. I just what a he's so I was, like I just was very competitive about it. I took it really, really seriously. And then yeah, and then at Canterbury, I got to flex a lot of muscles. Like I did some set painting and things like that. And yeah, and then I found directing, I think it was in grade 11, and I knew I'd like it right away. Like I just knew I'd like it because I had done like a lot of leadership camps and stuff. I liked being in charge. I liked seeing the big picture, that kind of thing. So yeah, I got into that as soon as I could, and I really did like it. And then I was one of the assistant directors of our grade 12 class. We did a show called the Triangle Factory Fire Project, which was this like massive collective-y kind of piece about the Triangle Factory fire in New York. Like, what a grad show to do in grade 12. Anyway, it was awesome. It was so much fun. And we also, at the time, we also had to do these things called director scenes, which were like you had 20 minutes to kind of direct something. You had to find your cast and choose the piece and stuff. It was so cool. And yeah, and I did a piece that I was really proud of, and my drama teacher said, Iain, you have a director's mind. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was very validating. And then yeah, and then I tried to get out of theater after grade 12. I tried to go more sort of the academia route. My dad's an academic, my mom's an English teacher, so that felt like, a good sort of other path for me, but I didn't like it at all.
Did you feel like that was something you had to do, or like what was pushing you to do that?
Good question. I don't think it was. I mean, I don't know. I guess there was just sort of the knowledge that the life was going to be really hard, and I've wanted to see if I could do something that wasn't like as poverty inducing, I guess, on some level. But yeah, then I tried it and I was like, oh, I don't really like writing essays that much. Like I'm pretty good at it, but like it turns out, yeah. So I went to Carleton. Well, I did a 1 year program at King's College in Halifax, and then I left and went home. And then I went to Carleton and I was miserable. And then I got into the theater company at Carleton. I was like working with them. And the way I used to describe it is that like my soul clicked back into place. Like it was like chiropractic, just went, and then suddenly I was myself again. And it was like, okay, well, this is what I meant to do. So I was like Mercutio, I was Oedipus, I directed a show, I stage managed a show, I did marketing for shows, I built sets. I just was all in on this theater company at Carleton called Sock and Buskin. And then once as I was starting to graduate, it was like, okay, I got to apply for theater schools. So went to George Brown, thanks to Peter Wilde, who I did like a course with. And actually, interestingly, on the first night of George Brown, we went to the pub, which you do. And one of my classmates came up to me and she was like, I have a theory about you. And I was like, okay. She's like, you're a director. For those who know George Brown, it's like there's no theater directing at all, right? It's pure acting, right? So for the fact that she knew right away that I was a director as well was pretty surprising. And then I ended up actually being able to do a lot of directing while I was there because people caught on to that. But anyway, so that was my origin story.
When you were at George Brown, was Peter still teaching there? Was he teaching at that point, or
He was, yeah, he just did at the time. It was just a third year. Oh God, was it third year or second year text analysis class? Oh no, was it 30 or so? Oh gosh, this is terrible.
But it all blurs together.
It was so long ago. But yeah, and we did James Joyce's Ulysses, which was what a text to analyze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was at George Brown, he was the head of acting, so it was quite the quite the experience. And at that point was it at the Young Center or was
It was.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was at the Young Center. Actually, that was honestly one of the reasons I wanted to go there. Like that was kind of why it was my top choice was like Soul Pepper's in the building. The Young Center is so cool. I loved being surrounded by all this brick and stuff. Like my other option, because I knew I didn't want to do another degree. So like my other option, I think, was Studio 58 in Vancouver, which is like a good program, but it's in like a basement. It's not right. So the majesty of being in the Young Center every day was a huge draw for sure.
Sure. Did it live up to it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I honestly think that the fact that I went to university first was probably a really well, I know it was a very, very smart decision, because if knowing like 19-year-old Iain, if he had been there, I would have crashed for sure. But
it's interesting because the thing, when Peter Wilde was the head of acting, he always used to, because we were all like 18, 19 years old going into theater school, and he constantly said, I wish you were older. I wish you were older. And, he'd say, if you would all just go away and come back to me in 5 years, everything would be wonderful. And we'd be like, shut up, old man. But there is something about coming at that program with some maturity under your belt.
Absolutely. And, because it just demands such a rigor that like most 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds just don't have a lot of practice at. And also because I knew that like, okay, well, I tried something else. I don't like that other thing. So this is it. Like going in with that attitude of like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to see this all the way through and take it as seriously as I possibly can, I think really did set me apart. And also like the degree that I did was in humanities and history. So going into George Brown, which was so text-based, they would be like, there'd be references to like Dante or whatever. And I'd go, oh yeah, I know Dante. Like, oh yeah, I know all these references and stuff, and like and knowing how to analyze text and like, and things like that did really feed into my time there. Yeah, really good times. Like tough as hell for sure. But I wouldn't change my experience there for anything.
I did want to ask you about, you said you basically went to 2 universities for brief periods of time.
Yes.
And I was curious if like, when you were like thinking like academia, is it for me? Did you go to the first school, it didn't work out, and you just thought like, oh, it's the school that's the problem?
That is exactly what I thought. I was like, oh, I got to get out of here. Like, yeah. I mean, also, I don't know, being 18 is a really hard, like 18 to 19 can be a really hard year for some people. And, I had a lot of mental health things going on and like, way too much freedom all of a sudden and stuff. So but I did equate it with, I have to get out of this school. And also like Halifax is a great town, but it's dark and rainy and snowy and I missed my friends and my old friends and stuff like that. I did meet some really good people. Like I met Chloe Hung there, for instance, who we ended up sort of working together and stuff. But yeah, I did equate it with the school, and then moving home, not really knowing kind of where to go from there, getting to this program at Carleton that was similar, but like took a bit more time and allowed me to do more history rather than like philosophy or religion and stuff, was a net positive. And then, yeah, getting back into the theater company is really what propelled me to finish the degree.
You've described yourself as someone who's followed a unconventional path. Is that the path, like going to is that academia to theater school, or what is the unconventional path that you see yourself on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just graduated George Brown. Okay, this is 2015. I just graduated George Brown. I was doing Shakespeare in backyards and musicals and Shakespeare at Port Perry and stuff like that. And then I was offered this job at Theater by the Bay of being the general manager and then executive director. And like for a 25-year-old to sort of find himself as the head of this like charity, not-for-profit organization, I think is a little unconventional. certainly. I mean, if I'd been a board member in that board meeting and Alex Doe had said, I want to bring in this guy that did this like indie producer training program with us, and I'd been like, okay, well, is he trained in anything? No, he's an actor. Oh, okay. Is he good at math? No, he hates. Is he okay? Is he from here? No, he's from Ottawa, then Toronto. Okay, does he know anything about charity, not-for-profit governance? Well, no. Okay, and so this is the guy that you want to bring in to help Theater by the Bay at this like really tumultuous moment? Yes. Like I would what I would do to have been a fly in the room during that conversation. But
Do you have any idea what the selling point was? Like how he managed to convince them?
I mean, I think boards of directors, and this is whatever, but boards of directors can go one of three ways. The first is that they just go, sure, whatever, and just let the leadership do whatever they want. The second way is that they go, we're in control, we're the professionals, we're the real people, and we got to get these artists in line, right? And then there's the third way, which is sort of the golden mean, where like, everyone understands what their job is. And I think it was a lot of the first, where Alex was like, I want to bring in this guy, and they were like, okay, and then that was kind of that.
It is interesting to go from, and I don't think that happens very often, that somebody goes from a conservatory acting program to arts administration without any kind of like experience in that.
Exactly. I wasn't like the head of social media or like, the assistant to whatever. It was like, no, you're the guy who's going to raise, tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Can I ask you about, because you spent a little while as in the arts administration field, and you mentioned like feeling a little bit like you needed the performance aspect, which is why you sort of were doing things with Theater Borough or Borough Theater. But did you enjoy the arts administration? Like if that came up again, would you do that again, or have you had your kick at that can and it's a no?
I would. There's a lot that I liked. I mean, as I said, like the mission really drove a lot of it. Like seeing I mean, I don't know if I could do it with any company. I think I would need to really learn about that company or really align with that mission internally. But I think like, as has been sort of clear, like Theater by the Bay was my first job out of theater school, like, and I put almost 10 years into it. So I think, and I there were certainly points throughout my experience there where I felt like, gosh, I wish I had more experience, or like, gosh, I wish I knew this when I started and things like that. And I'm sure that's always the case, but I think what I've needed and what sort of life has given me now post Theater by the Bay is the chance to work with other companies and like see how they work and learn from the inside and that kind of thing, and see like what I like that other companies do, what I don't. And all of that will feed and fuel me for when that next big arts management job, hopefully artistic director, because that's more the side that I like, I'll be the more prepared in some ways for that when the time comes. And I think I'll have a pretty unique edge because like I'm 35 and I have a decade of high level arts management experience. Like, I raised $1.5 million in grants before I turned 34. Like there's not a lot of people, and in a company that was getting OAC project grants if they were lucky when I started. So yeah. And so, I would when the time comes, but I think right now I'm honestly in the lane that I need to be.
Yeah. Did arts administration teach you anything about what a director needs or what a director needs to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, for sure. I think certainly as a director now on the outside, I'm much more practical. Like, I'm just kind of like, for instance, I with Bluebirds, I was able to kind of, it didn't take me very long to go, okay, this is how this company works and this is what my job is going to be and stuff. And fortunately, because of my sort of scrappy indie background, I was able to adapt pretty quickly to those kinds of environments. But like, I don't know, I feel like a good director is someone who understands the core of a play so well that they can adapt it to the scope of the company that they're working with, if that makes sense. Like if I did Bluebirds with well, I did theater on the Ridge, but if I did Bluebirds at like Crows, you know what I mean? Like I feel like my concept would be probably the same, but just like upscaled, if that makes sense. But yeah, having a good producer background helps get you to those sort of conclusions in terms of what how the company works and what the scope of the project will be much more quickly. And then also like in terms of what I think also like a director, at least a good director is a producer to a degree. Like you do kind of think about, messaging and audience and things like that. And as I've been starting to kind of like pitch myself more to more companies, I have been actually thinking about that as a pretty strong value add, where it's like, if you hire me as a director, you're not just getting a director. You're someone who like has a Rolodex of theater reviewers that like him a lot and would come see his stuff. You're going with, like I have lots of connections and things like that I'm not afraid to leverage. If you need me to go to a sponsor dinner and pitch my show with you because you need someone who's excited who can talk about the show, like I'm very familiar with that. If you need something for a grant application, I've written countless grant applications. I can help with that. And people seem to be responding to that as a value add as a director.
Your approach as a director, and especially, we can use Bluebirds as an example.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming to a play like Bluebirds, where's the first place you go? How do you take it from script to casting to staging?
Honestly, I think my university background of text analysis really sets me on the right path. So one thing I have is like, I have a little bit of like a ritual about like the first time I read a script that I know I'm going to direct, where I like have my, my mug of tea. I have my little notepad next to me and I have to like read the whole thing and just kind of like jot things down as just as they're coming to me, and be it a little drawing, be it a word that stands out, a line that stands out. And because like the first time you read something, I don't know if this is very obvious, but like whatever. But for me, the first time you read something, knowing you're going to direct it, you only get that once. So making sure that it's given its proper due is really important. And then, it's a lot of reading and rereading and trying to read it from different perspectives and lenses, trying to meet with designers as early as possible. And I like to think that I'm a director that's extremely collaborative. I really value everyone's opinions in the room. I really like meeting with designers as early as possible, often because sometimes they're getting the script around the same time that you are, right? So like getting their first impulses as well can be really, really valuable and helpful. Yeah. And then I try not to come to any conclusions about like, what is it trying to say until often quite late in the process. Like there's this exercise that Jeanette Lambermont-Maury, who directed me at George Brown, and I got to assistant direct for her while I was there, has, where you kind of like really distill the script into, one line of this is how it opens, like 2 to 3 lines. It's like basic story crafting stuff, but really specific. And then the climax of the play being a single line or a single stage direction, denouement thing. And I find that exercise really helpful when I feel that I've read it enough that I can come to those conclusions. And I also try to set myself a challenge with each show. Like with Bluebirds, one of the things that I knew I wanted to do was incorporate physical theater into it. And I'm not like trained in physical theater really, but like when I was working with Alison McMacken, whom you should talk to if you haven't, she's amazing, did with us at George Brown was she did kind of like Grotowski inspired physical theater work. So I infused that because that was sort of the physical theater vocabulary that I had into the Bluebirds process from the beginning and helped that sort of shape the choreography of it because well, especially with that, I'm going to narrow in on a point I brought, but especially with that script, there's like basically no stage directions. It's all just tiny little vignettes. So I felt, and also there's this ethereal element and this practical element. So I thought like having a strong physical theater vocabulary beneath it would just add more momentum and sort of physicalize that ethereal quality. So anyway, so I set myself that challenge and the actors really responded to it and the audiences and the reviewers really responded to it as well. It just kind of worked in this beautiful way, but it wouldn't have happened had I not sort of set myself that challenge on that show. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think about.
Yeah. Working in Port Perry and working on this show, is there anything that you learned during the process of working on Bluebirds?
Yes, so many things, but the one that stands out to me right now is that, boy, howdy, do I love directing when I don't have to produce the show. You know, like, because with Theater by the Bay, I could feel my cell phone like burning when I'm in rehearsal, right? There's emails, there's messages, there's things I got to take care of, right? And I had to just breathe, put that aside, and just focus. Meanwhile, with Bluebirds, I had none of that. You know, I had none of that going on except some consulting work that I've been doing. So just being able to go fully focused, it was like, oh, I'm really good at this, especially when I can just focus on what I need to focus on. So anyway, that may be a lifelong thing I work on, but that was one of the big takeaways was like, yeah, I really love being able to just focus on the work when I can.
I mean, it must be very difficult to be leading a company and leading a show because those are two very different responsibilities and different pulls. So I can imagine, I'm just, like you were describing it, I'm imagining the burning of the phone, right?
Oh, yeah. And there were some really, really hard Theater by the Bay stuff that was going on during some of those shows where it was like, oh my God, we're done rehearsal at 6 and I've got to raise $4,000 before I go to bed tonight. Otherwise, there's no money. Snake is because like that check that we've been waiting on hasn't arrived yet, or like something's delayed or postponed or whatever. And so just having that, you know, in the back of your head as you're trying to focus on the beautiful work in front of you, it really requires an intense discipline and I don't miss it. And then also, of course, like as you're trying to, I mean, I love text work, right? As I said, like I love just spending as much time with the script as possible. And when you're raising the money or writing the grants or doing all the stuff that you have to do before you get into rehearsals so that you can set those rehearsals up for as much success as you can by not having to deal with as much stuff on the outside, right? It's just like you literally just don't have the time to be able to do that kind of intense text work that you love. And Theater by the Bay was not a big company ever really, but you know, it was myself as the one full-time staff member. Then I had a part-time administrator and 2 contractors that had very specific jobs that they did in conjunction with a whole bunch of other jobs. So it was me, right? Like I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have anyone else well, apart from one through the Metcalf Foundation. Thank you, Metcalf Foundation. Bless the Metcalf Foundation. But, you know, I didn't have basically any help. So it was, yeah, if it was like, okay, we have to raise $4,000 by tomorrow, guess who is the person who's doing it?
That is too much for a person who's like also trying to do a show because you shouldn't have to worry about that when you're directing. So I can imagine it was very freeing to do this show and not have to ever worry about that at all.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. For sure. In fact, it was nice to be able to go to the producer and say, carry the AD and be like, how can I help?
Mm.
What do you need? Do you need me to go to this dinner? Whatever you need, I'm here for you and be able to support. It was nice to be able to do that.
Well, you are, like you said, you have the knowledge of the things that she's dealing with in,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least in some like abstract way, so you can offer that.
Oh, absolutely. And especially like because as we said, it's a rural theater. So like those actors are staying at these farms, and guess who's driving them to their farms after rehearsal? The artistic director of the company. So she had to add that into her day because none of these actors have cars because they're all from Toronto and
Of
stuff,
course,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I bless Carrie, bless Theater on the Ridge. And yeah, it was so nice to be able to do as much as I could. And I hope to be able to continue to help them and every company that I work with.
Do you know what you have coming up next?
Yeah, so I have a production of The Seagull that I'm doing in the fall with Burrowed Theater, which I'm excited about. A couple other potential things. I'm also directing a community theater show in the area. The Gravitational Pull of Bernice Trimble, which is a great Canadian play by Beth Thomas Graham.
I was just saying to somebody just the other day that in this country, we do not have enough respect for community theater. In the UK, it's part of the ecosystem, and we sort of tend to get a little snooty about it here. And I think it is an essential part of our theater world in Canada, and we can't ignore it, and we shouldn't ignore it.
Honestly, I love it. I love, if I can do it, I try to, because I mean, these are people that, they're not getting paid. They're there to do it for the love of doing it. It's as a director, it's a chance to kind of flex a few muscles in terms of, working with actors on those fundamentals, and often they'll have a lot of habits and stuff that you get to work with them through and stuff. And then also, I mean, for someone that's done a lot of indie theater, sometimes they have bigger budgets on the set and design that some professional stuff that I've done. And and obviously like it's complicated because of course artists deserve to be paid and things like that. And I wish that even they got something, but I do think that it is such an important part of the ecosystem. And then also, yeah, like in terms of the shows that they do, I mean, when else would I do Gravitational Pull of Bernice Trimble? I mean, I did Dancing at Lunasa like in 2019, and I did All My Sons in 2018 and stuff. And they're like, amazing shows that the chances of doing them are so slim. And if those actors and designers are there to have a great time with you and you've got the time, I don't know. I see nothing wrong with it. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Iain, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much for what you do and coming back and bringing this back. I think it's fantastic. I've loved listening to the episodes that I've been able to. And yeah, kudos to you. And also, just very quickly, I've loved that you've been bringing in artists from outside of Toronto to talk about what they're doing. I think that's just fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about next week's show in just a second. But first, I want to make sure that I cover a little bit of housekeeping. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, the like button. If there's something you want to comment on, go down below on YouTube and leave a little comment for this episode. If you're subscribed, hit the bell icon so you always get notified when a new episode is released. If you're listening to the audio version and you're not subscribed, make sure that you search for Stageworthy in your favorite podcast app, hit the follow or subscribe button, and then whenever I release an episode, it'll get downloaded directly to your device. I want to talk for a second about my Patreon because I cannot make this show without my patrons. Patrons get early access to episodes. We participate in discussions about those episodes or about ideas that I might have for future episodes. And so if you want to be a part of that, if you want to help me to make this show both financially and to be a part of the people who help me make decisions about this show, become a patron. Go to patreon.com/stageworthy and sign up. It just costs $7 Canadian a month. And for that little bit, you become part of the people who help make this show possible. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Virgilia Griffith, who is currently at the Shaw Festival, starring in Blues for an Alabama Sky, as well as part of the cast of that improvised show, Murder on the Lake. You won't want to miss this conversation, so I hope I will see you back here next week on Stageworthy.